Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Nell Pepper, and on behalf of Harvard Bookstore, I am delighted to introduce this virtual event with OSCAR HOKEAH, presenting his debut novel, Calling for a Blanket Dance, in conversation with Gabriel Bump. Thank you so much for joining us virtually tonight. Harvard Bookstore's virtual event series continues alongside our in-person programming, bringing authors and their work to our community, both digitally and in Cambridge. Please check out the full event schedule on our website at harvard.com/events. And while you're there, you can sign up for our email newsletter for more updates and browse our bookshelves from home, or indeed from wherever you may be. This evening's discussion will conclude with some time for your questions. If you have a question for our speakers at any time during the talk tonight, you can click on the Q&A button on your screen, and we will get through as many questions as time allows. This event also will have closed captioning available. Depending on the version of Zoom that you are using, you may need to enable captions yourself by clicking on the closed caption button on your screen. Also in the chat, I'll be posting a link to purchase copies of Calling for a Blanket Dance on harvard.com. Your purchases and financial contributions make events like tonight's possible and help ensure the future of a landmark independent bookstore. We thank you so much for your continued support over these couple of real bizarre years, continuing to show up and tune in, not only in support of our authors and of this series, but also of the fabulous booksellers at Harvard Bookstore. We all sincerely appreciate your support now and always. And lastly, as you likely have experienced in virtual gatherings, technical issues may arise. We, of course, hope that they do not, but if they do, we will do our best to resolve them quickly. And thank you all for your patience and understanding. And now I am delighted to introduce our speakers. OSCAR HOKEAH is a citizen of Cherokee Nation and the Kiowa Tribe of Oklahoma from his mother's side, and has Mexican heritage through his father. His short stories have been published in South Dakota Review, American Short Fiction, Yellow Medicine Review, Surreal South, and Red Ink magazine. He works with Indian child welfare in Tahlequah and holds an MA in English with a concentration in Native American literature from the University of Oklahoma, as well as a BFA in creative writing from the Institute of American Indian Arts. Gabriel Bump's first novel, Everywhere You Don't Belong, was a New York Times notable book. His nonfiction and fiction have appeared in Slam magazine, The Huffington Post, Springhouse Journal, and other publications. He was awarded the 2016 Deborah Schlossberg Memorial Award for Fiction and the 2020 Ernest J. Gaines Award for Literary Excellence. He received his MFA in fiction from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. And tonight they will be discussing OSCAR HOKEAH's new novel, Calling for a Blanket Dance. The novel takes us into the life of Ever Guimasaddle through the multi-generational perspectives of his family members, their stories marked as much by oppression and institutional violence as by love and the resilience of their ancestral cultures. All of Ever's relatives have ideas about who he is and who he should be. And once he becomes an adult, Ever must take the strength given to him by his relatives to save not only himself, but also the next generation of his family. I am delighted to turn things over to our speakers. The digital podium is yours, OSCAR and Gabriel.
Well,
hi, everybody.
Yeah, how's it going? Thanks for that introduction. Sorry for jumping across you at the beginning. I'm over eager.
No, you're fine.
And OSCAR, I'm really thrilled to meet you virtually. I read the book, early in the spring, I think, and it's even stuck with me from that first read up until second read today. And then just watching you gear up for publication day. So it's been a thrill to watch this gain steam, get so much good early press, and for it to take off the way that it has. And so I think first I want to say congratulations, obviously. And then just how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Doing good. It's going good. It's going really good. Thank you, Gabe. And I want to thank you for that amazing blurb. if you haven't read his blurb, please, jump onto the website and other spots. It's really amazing. Yeah, no, it's been a little crazy the past few days. There's always stuff to do, and just trying to juggle and also work. Do the 9 to 5 kind of thing at the same time. So it's been different, and it's been good. It's been really good to see that kind of excitement build up. There was something about the buzz like last week about Wednesday. It just everything kind of shifted. I was just doing my regular 9 to 5 deal, taking care of my kids. And then last Wednesday, all of a sudden, the energy just shifted and was a little bit more, I guess, electric is what it would be. But it's just kind of been building.
Electric in a good way, I think.
Electric in a good way, yeah. Yeah. So, but yeah, super excited to be here. Super excited to hang out with you. Thank you for doing this. Yeah. So I think it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, man. Of course, it was a no brainer. It's not work for me, so it seems like a pleasure. It's going to be, and because I want to talk about actually your 9 to 5 work towards the end of the conversation if we have time, and like how you kind of balance that with the writing. But I think just before we jump into how this book came together, like kind of how you decided to craft it the way, because it's interesting not just for content, but like how it's put together, right? So I like to pick your brain on some of that stuff. But first, just to start us off, would you mind reading us a section?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll read a portion of the book. So I'm going to read Quentin Quintone's chapter. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to read a section of it just to give you a feel for some like the Kiowa voice in the novel. And so just to set this particular chapter up. So at this age, Quentin Quitone is his cousin, and they're the same age, or just like a few months apart. And so Quitone and Evergimisado have just gotten their per cap. We call it a per cap from the cap. As natives, we call it a per cap whenever we get like money from the tribe. And so in this situation, it's where the Kiowa, Comanche, and Apaches had leased some land there's a military base near Lawton. And so they got a big chunk of money, and the different tribes did different things with it. And so the Kiowa tribe had put money in trust for everyone under the age of 18. And so they just got their per cap. So they just got a lump sum of money. And so this is kind of like their first, like, oh wow, I finally got it's finally here kind of thing. So I'm gonna read that. So all right, so Quentin Quitone, 1993. Yeah, we were just little guys, around a year old when Kiowa started getting that a hongia. Maybe back in 76, no, maybe in 77. It was a coalition of Kiowas, Comanches, and Apaches that leased the tract of land of Fort Sill military base for 100 years. Good thing, too, because as Kiowas divided our share of the money between all tribal members, 1,500 apiece. Those of us under the age of 18 had our money held in trust, growing interest until our day. We were the last in our families to hear our mothers say, your per cap check is on the table. My birthday landed 2 months before yours. On your day, you burst into a laughing fit, and I told you calm yourself down, guy. On my day, I simply said, your boy Quentin just got paid. And I maintained all the way into the bedroom. But we both tore into those envelopes faster than the last meat pie on a plate. Ripped out those stiff government checks, too. Remember the Statue of Liberty imprint in the upper left corner? Remember the line of numbers in the center right? Mine was $9,826.17. The hot off the press scent from that crisp paper hit us like the cool wall of air when we walked into the Bank of Oklahoma. Might know, the lady behind the counter did the same to you as she did to me. She glanced from the check to her face and back to the check again, tapping those red plastic fingernails on the counter. Her eyes barely squinted when she asked us how we managed to get our hands on that kind of money. You told her the tribe wanted to help neglected bank tellers buy bleach for untreated roots. I had a permanent grin that no one would spoil, so I asked her if she dated Kiowas, and she said no. So I asked her if she dated Comanches, and she said no. So I asked her if she dated Cherokees, and she said no. Yeah, guess I was out of luck because I was all out of tribes. We waved at the bank tellers as we pushed open the doors. That Ma Bang pretended to not notice. Still, even she couldn't ignore the 6,000 in the checking account or the 4,000 in our pockets. Wasn't it our oldest cousin Leanne who put her entire per cap in savings? Maybe it was her sister Bessie. They saved the money for books and tuition at the University of Oklahoma. We had been dreaming about spending that a hongia for 3 years since our boy Blacktail's older brother Big Bo got his per cap. He cruised into the south side of Lawton, our section of the city, The View, in a Cadillac Seville. That Cadillac was new used, uptown, clean enough to pass for brand new. Stink guy, too, as he bumped down 11th Street and turned into the convenience store on three-wheel motion. Right then, that's when we knew we were not like Leanne and Bessie. On my day, my dad warned me, Quentin, fast money goes fast. And he drove us to OKC, where I could find a good car cheap. It took us an hour and a half to drive up I-44. I flashed open the bank envelope a dozen times, showing you and Dad both how the hundreds lined up as smooth as beads down a loom. On your day, I drove you to OKC myself. We were going to turn money into a line of colognes, hundreds, 50s, and 20s, bottled and packaged. Your Monte Carlo sat middle row front at Honest Harry's dealership. You grabbed my arm so tight, I lost circulation. Said, Quentin, pull over, 6 times. That dealer was bullheaded about the $3,000 price written on the windshield. What about $2,500 cash? He took the fresh bills, bulldogged, and signed over the title to your money. My Cadillac Eldorado dripped clean from a fresh car wash, gleamed gold with that tan paint drop and the bright sunlight. It faced the main office at Classy Cars. The dealer wanted to take it home until I flashed open the bank envelope. He took $4,000 easy, didn't even have to haggle for my L-Dog. Once back in Lawton, you still had cash in your pocket after buying your car, but on my day, I had to stop by the Bank of Oklahoma again. That same teller said I had to wait 3 days for a check to clear. Why did she give me $4,000 the day before? I asked to see the manager. Oh, it was a government check, that Ma Bang told me. She flipped her long hair to the other side of her face and pulled $2,000 from the drawer. At Soundwave, it cost me some serious cash for those 12-inch speakers, that 400-watt amp, a noise reducer, and an equalizer. My bass was clean and low, but I only had enough money left over for gas and McDonald's. You liked your music hard and dirty, so you dropped the last of that $1,500 for some 18s inside a plexiglass box. Low on funds, we weaved through the back roads of Lawton and returned to the Bank of Oklahoma. Was it on your per cap or mine when we ran to the building 1 minute before closing? That teller was already locking the doors. She gave us a smirk, spun on her heels, and disappeared into the bank. We cruised away, blasting the latest tape by the Zotai singers, and shook the building with waves of intertribal beats. We hit the back roads again, crept into the View, and parked on Blacktail's front lawn. That intertribal wave carried with the same rumble of those artillery shells from the practice rounds at Fort Sill, the ones that shook the entire city of Lawton. Proud guys, we danced the way Kyle was danced and reminisced about per caps gone by. So I'll stop there.
No, I think that's perfect. I'm really glad you read that section. We were talking about some of the other ones, and this is, I think, where I want to start with this beautiful book. Is I don't understand how you were able to jump around perspectives. So for people that I guess haven't read about the book or heard about it, calling for a blanket down or heard kind of the telling of it explained. I mean, is it's a story about a young man, Ever, was told through different perspectives of his family, like across, almost 40 years.
Yeah.
Of family members, and each chapter is a different perspective on this one person, essentially. Some of it's different. And so each chapter sounds a little bit different. It's each in like a different voice. and the Quentin one is maybe the most distinct of the voices. So before we get into like why you kind of structured it in this way, like what was gained, how you went about writing it, since you just read the Quentin section, what was writing Quentin like? Because it seems like there's this like cultural history embedded with this like punk teenage culture that is like not, it maybe feels uniquely American, but goes across like kind of race and like in America, right? This idea that young kid gets money, wants to spend it on a car, wants to impress the girl. Like that's just, that's the American story. Right? In a lot of ways, right? So can you tell us more about Quentin before we talk about the family as a whole?
That voice, it took me a while to get it. So back in 2008, that's when I very first wrote that particular chapter, was way back then, 14 years ago. And I remember just like being like a typical kind of writer where I'm like trying to figure out my voice, like what's my voice? How am I going to write? Just trying to understand that concept of voice, especially back then. It's really elusive. Like, I think that's the most elusive aspect of writing. Like a lot of the other kind of structural elements they teach us are, pretty definitive and pretty clear. But then, whenever, for me, it was anyway, when I started talking about voice, it just felt really elusive, and it took me a while to grasp it. And it was through Quentin that I was able to finally figure out, get something of a direction. So, like I would call that my, when I write my Kiowa voice, like I have what I call a Cherokee voice. And so that's what I would call my Kiowa voice. And so basically it's kind of a mix of, the way me, my cousins, my family down in Lawton, just how we talk, just trying to gather up those kind of inflections, the pauses. But I'm super interested in how we as Native people will transform English to sound almost native, like to sound like our language. And so I think that that's a lot of what goes on, is that there's this kind of transformation. And I'm interested in slang. I'm interested in colloquial speech, in general. And so what I do is I write, I use Kiowa words, I use Kiowa phrases, but I also use Kiowa slang. So in that particular chapter, you'll hear characters call each other Bobs, and so the way to say brother in Kiowa is Bobby. You're like, hey, Bobby, like that's saying, hey, brother. But Bob's is kind of like bro, like, hey, Bobs, how you doing? And so I like slang, I like English slang, Kiowa slang, Cherokee slang. And I think that's where you're picking up that, where you talk about like, almost like teen kind of punk culture element. Yeah, like street vernacular, very much comes out in that particular chapter, especially. But I think that that's part of the reason, is that I'm, fascinated with slang and just colloquial speech. And I think it shines through really good, and specifically in that particular chapter. But it's intertwined at different spaces and throughout the novel.
Yeah, can you tell us more about that, like, fascination with colloquialisms? Like, when did that start for you? Has that always been like a part of your like writing process? It's like trying to hear that and get down to it?
No, that took a long time. First, I started off with that particular story, and then I wrote another story that was more Cherokee centric, and so that's the Cherokee centric story that I wrote next is chapter 3 in the novel, and it's Hayes Shade. So Quentin Quitone initially was written as a short story called Our Day, and it was published in American Short Fiction back in 2010. And then the next story, which is Hayes Shade now, was originally titled Time Like Masks, and was a standalone story that was published in South Dakota Review in 2011. But I wrote those two stories at IAI, which was, I was at IAI between 2006, 2009. So 2008, 2009, I wrote those, went on to OU in 2010. And just kind of went through a period where I wasn't writing as much as far as creative writing. I could do like academic critical writing. So it was an MA in English. It wasn't an MFA program. And so I spent, a couple of years kind of away from, thinking about colloquialism and that kind of, I wasn't really sure what I was going to do as far as voice as part of it. It's like I had these very distinctive voices, but for some reason it wasn't clicking. And I went through a block. So right at the end of graduating from I went through a block. It took me a couple of years to get out of it. So once I graduated from OU, all of a sudden I just was like, well, I'm gonna go full force with this Kiowa Cherokee kind of way of speaking. And that's gonna be, I decided at that point, well, that's gonna be my voice. It's pretty obvious now that should have been the whole time. But with writing, there's so much self-doubt, like you write so much in isolation that you're like, oh, I don't know if I should do that, or what I should do. So there's a lot of questioning, but eventually I landed on that. And I think that when I first started, I think there were some influences at OU that were talking a great deal about vernacular, and just, colloquial speech. There was a lot of, going on as far as dialogue back then. And so it was always in my mind. And so once I started writing the novel, I just ran with it. Like, okay, this is the thing. I'm going to run with it now. So after I graduated 2012 from OU, that's kind of where it started to take off.
So what was the moment where you knew you had these two short stories? Like where did those short stories turn into a novel for you? Mm-hmm. Right? Like because I guess it's all centered around Ever. Mm-hmm. Was Ever in those two short stories or no?
Yeah, it was the same character in those two short stories. So it was the same character, but initially, if you go back to the American short fiction version of it, there's no names in it. It's all just you and I. And so it's almost like the way I wanted to write it was like if you're sitting at a coffee shop and you overhear somebody talking and they're like, yo, you remember when you did this? Remember when this happened? You did this and I did that. And you're just overhearing a conversation between two people. So that's how I wrote it initially. But it was the same character. So it wasn't until probably about 2013 I started to think of it in terms of like a collection of stories, like a novel and stories, more like a traditional novel and stories. I think that Olive Kitteridge had come out around the time I was at II. And so that was the first time I had really delved into a novel and stories. I didn't even know you could do. I was like, I didn't know you could do that. That's a great idea. And so I was, going off of that, like, okay, I'm just going to write some stories all based on the same character. And that, I had like a collection that I titled Reflections on the Water. And I tried to, back in 2013, 14, I tried to pitch it to some agents and try to shop it. I wasn't really getting any takers. And it just kind of, was like, well, it's not working out. And so I just put it aside. And I kind of started doing that self-doubt thing again, where I was like, I don't know if what I should do, what direction I should go. And so I didn't really write almost at all, really, for 2 years after that. So I was like, 2015, I had gotten a concept for a different book. So I was like, that one's not working. I'm just going to write something different. And I wrote the first draft of a different book. And then after I finished that up, I was talking with a professor from OU, and he just emailed me out of the blue, just checking on me. And he was like, well, what are you working on? And so it made me think of the collection of stories. And so I was like, well, it didn't work out. I'm just going to tear this thing up. I'm pulling stories out and I'm putting new ones in, and I'm just going to see what happens. And so what happened was I started to see this kind of decolonization narrative. I started to see Ever Gimasato as going through a transformation. It wasn't like a cross comparison type deal. It was you could see where he was overcoming obstacles, and the culture was the solution. And so, based on that premise alone, going through the process of decolonization, I decided, okay, I'm going to create this, this narrative that's around this one character, and so that's what I got together, and that's what I started to pitch. And so that was probably about 2000. I probably got up about 2017. I guess it was pretty much like a solid, like close to what it is now. Really, when I got with my agent in 2018, that's when it really kind of really took off. That's when it really became what it is now. Because then she was, when she got it, it was about 50,000 words. And she was excited about it. I was excited about it. And she was like, well, you got to add 30,000 words to this in order for us to do something with it. And I was, like on the outside, I was like, yes, I can do that. 30,000, that's not a problem. But on the inside, I was like, oh my goodness, 30,000 words. So, but I did it, I did it. And so that's where you get like Vincent Guillemissaddle. He was born in 2018, 2019. Api Guillemissaddle, she was born in 2019. Lonnie Nowater, she was also born at that point. And then it just really created so many new avenues for the main character that, it became what it is now.
Yeah, man, that's really fascinating to hear, especially because even just saying the characters that just sprung up, like the first characters you started with, I mean, the amount of time that's in between these people, like in the page, right? So we have Vincent is 1981, right? Quentin's 93, Hayes 86, and then Api is 2010, right? So you have and this is why when I read it, it reminded me of 100 Years of Solitude, just kind of the epic span of it, not necessarily the epic length, because it's still a manageable story. But I can only imagine if I was talking to my agent and I showed them 50,000 words and they said, give me 30,000 more. I think.
Yeah, it was it was a moment. I remember it vividly.
Yeah, that's how badly do you want it? That's the thing. So why, I don't know, why cover so much time, right? And I feel this, it didn't necessarily have to. It felt like a choice, right? To start with the 70s and end up in 2013 when we finally hear from Ever at the end in 2013. Because it feels like we're encapsulating all those generations, all those decades. To me, it felt like we get a better sense of kind of the culture and the people by covering that much time. We see it change over, but that was just my instinct. What was behind your thinking behind that?
Yeah, no, I thought that in order to transform, I think it takes time. This, for me, I would call this a decolonization story. That's how I would describe it. In order to overcome some of these really ingrained issues that come up because of historical trauma, it's not something that I'm not going to go through one incident and I'm going to be healthy. I think that this is a transformation story, and it takes sometimes it takes time, and it takes a lot of hands helping individuals along in order to create that kind of real substantial type of healing. And I think it's one of those situations where especially I feel anyway in this book that whenever one person heals, everybody feels it, and so I wanted to make sure to do that justice.
Yeah, especially those, I like what you say there about having kind of so many hands on this one boy, because it feels, I don't know, it feels like a family kind of shepherding this guy along, even if it's not intentional all the time. It's each chapter, each perspective change kind of feels like a hand on Ever's shoulder or something, just we're pushing him forward.
Oh yeah, that's a good
learning. He's learning his own lessons. I think it ends up being so beautiful, especially at the, that doesn't give anything away, because in the table of contents, you see, we hear from Ever at the end. But the second we get to that chapter, it's unbelievable stuff, I think. It's kind of one of those things, we're seeing this person, and then you finally hear from him. And it's, I don't know, it's like your hero walks on screen or something like that. It's so I think that's perfect. And when you say decolonization, I'm interested, and if we can maybe sidestep a little bit to talk about yourself as a writer, less about the book, right?
Okay.
But like, is decolonization kind of part of your artistic practice in general, or is it kind of like just an epiphany that came out when you were trying to figure out how to make this book work?
I think, that is a great question. Thank you for asking me that question. Yeah, no, I think the process of decolonization is probably like the number one topic that we're talking about in the Native community. And so when I get to I'm taking creative writing classes, but I also got a minor in Indigenous Liberal Studies. And so that topic of decolonization was like every semester we had some kind of in-depth discussions, and at least, probably half of my classes had in-depth discussions about decolonization. And so, many of the students from the Institute of American Indian Arts, which is a very unique institution, churn out artists who are thinking in those terms, like reflecting on ourselves in this landscape of to a certain degree, displacement, and having to deal with some historical trauma. And how do we get out of that? How do we help each other get out of that? So I think it's just, it's a super important topic to all Natives, all Indigenous people are always aware of, that process. And so whenever I graduate from, well, actually, I've been working with at-risk Native youth for almost 20 years. While I was at I was working as a frontline worker in a group home with all Native youth. And I've kind of stayed on that trajectory just because that was like my working environment, even though I was going to school for writing. And so even after I graduated with the writing degrees, all through that time, I was still working with some type of organization. Like I went from Intermountain Youth Centers to the Santa Fe Mountain Center to Indian Child Welfare, and just been working in the community. So I just stayed on that path. And because I've been on the front lines for so long, and having had that education at IAI on the process of decolonization, that it's, it's become something substantial inside of my writing and what I write about. So definitely in this book, it's, like I would say it is, explicitly decolonization narrative. And, even in my, the book that I'm working on now, that I'm polishing up right now, that has real heavy themes of working with decolonization. So I think, I give credit to my teachers at I and them kind of embedding that thinking into me, so that I can go out and do my part to try to help heal the community.
Well, it seems like you are very much like actively kind of on the front lines. So I mean, I commend you for that, or like kind of being out there and really doing the work. I think is great, and I don't want to invite the wrath of now.
Yeah.
But so we can. I see a few questions in the Q&A.
Okay.
And if you have any, you can plop them in there. I will check and ask. All right. So here's one. Were there novels that you look to as models for the multi-voice style of this book? I guess you mentioned Olive Kittredge, but were there other ones?
Well, one of the main things that happened at that time too is that whenever, like, in Scott Momaday definitely is like a major influence on me. I mean, he's Kiowa, and it was.
I didn't know he was Kiowa. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, he's Kiowa, and I found a lot of validation in reading his work, and so I think one of the biggest influences as far as finding out these kind of different voices was that when I got to the point where I needed to find a Cherokee voice, like I was like, okay, I got my Kiowa down, and now I need to get my Cherokee. I've actually fell in love with a writer by the name of Alice Monroe. I don't know if you've heard of her, but
oh yeah, of course, yeah.
yeah. So, but yeah, I just became fascinated with her, her pacing, and it just took me into a world. Just her voice, was able to pull me into a world that I had no experience in, and so I took a lot from her voice, and I guess I could see because of the way she paced her sentences, and I read Child's Play. She wrote a short story by the name of Child's Play, which got a lot of recognition. I probably, And when I was at II, I probably read it at least a dozen times. But after that, since then, I probably read it, 20 something more times. But, just like studying it. And I think that allowed me to really figure out how to pace my Cherokee voice a little bit different. And so I think that because it was written in pieces, like I wrote 2 chapters at one point, went through a block, came back and started writing other pieces, and then tore it apart and then added more pieces. I think because of, that happening over a 14-year span, it kind of created this, really unique structure to the book. So I think that was probably the primary, reason I was able to capture those elements within it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that sounds Alice Munro. I guess I wouldn't have thought of it, but now that you said it, like, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, if you read, especially like Turtle Gimasaddle's chapter,
Yeah.
and you think of
Yeah.
Alice Munro, you'll feel
Yeah.
that rhythm. Yeah. So
This is crazy. Okay. Well, and then we have a few more questions. If we have, and now you can feel free to jump on and tell us when we've run out of time. But one is where the name Ever come from.
okay, so it's Everardo. So it's, like in the book, his father's name is Eduardo Francisco Carrillo Chavez, and so Ever is named after him, and so he's named Eduardo Carrillo Chavez. So like really, I just kind of I really like unique names. As a writer, I want something that's not kind of overused, a little bit familiar, but something that's going to just really, really unique. And I think that's where I saw that. I just saw the name somewhere. I'm not sure where I saw it, but it was like, oh, that's a cool name, Eduardo. And so I'm going to use it. And then, so I had to distinguish Ever from his dad. So I just, had to cut it down to Ever. But I think that's common with that individuals who have that name Eduardo. I guess sometimes the nickname they end up with is Ever. So
It's also, I don't know, because when I hear that name, I hear like time passing too, right? Like, and so it's for whatever reason, like that triggers that, and so I feel it's perfect for this book. Like,
nice.
It's just amazing. But then, so another one is, does poetry influence your writing at all? And that's from Ronnie.
Yeah, I love to read poetry, and that writing poetry has always been really hard for me to write it, and I've always admired poets because you have to, in order to write a good poem, you have to take that vulnerability to a whole new level. Like you got to be like so, detailed, honest with yourself and the world that sometimes I think I write fiction because you don't you definitely have to be vulnerable in order to connect with readers, but I just think that poetry takes it to a whole new level. But I think that more than likely it does. I when you're in a BFA MFA program, you study poetry pretty in depth, so I'm sure that it has had an effect on me for sure.
Well, the book starts with the epigraph is a poem from N. Scott Momaday.
Well, it's actually a sentence from House Made of Dawn. But I think they just structured it up like that to fit on the.
But he was also a poet. I guess that's why I bring it. Like,
he was. Yeah, he is. Yeah, he is a poet. Yeah.
That's what.
Yeah, and then he did some interesting narrative structures, like with the book The Way to Rainy Mountain is really that has an odd structure, an interesting structure to it. So.
No, and I think that I don't know if y'all like talk at all or anything like that, or know each other, but y'all are I don't know, it seems like you're really carrying on an important tradition there with M. Scott.
I've never met him. And so one interesting thing that happened is when I graduated from OU, I went to II to do just an adjunct for a semester, a couple semesters. I think it was a couple, but his box at the office was right above mine, so you could see Hokeaah and Mama
And you
Day.
didn't meet him. Yeah.
Yeah, well, he was teaching the same time. He was adjuncting too, and so, but I, you know, our paths never crossed. Like, but you know, I was working a full-time job and adjuncting at the same time, and so you know, always busy, and just never our paths just never crossed. But it was always interesting to walk into the office and see that. For me, it was like this moment of, oh man, look at that's Mama Day. I got my name's right there. But you know what's really interesting about Mama Day is that he's from Saddle Mountain, which is tiny. It's a tiny Kiowa community, but that's where my family also derives from, that same community. That's pretty
Yeah, but
bizarre
there's got to be something in the water to have
out there.
two
Yeah, something's
runners
going
like
on.
that. Two runners. And then so we have a few more, and I think we're good on time. Yeah, we got some time.
Okay.
So one is you mentioned you experienced some self-doubt in your writing process, and can you share a little bit more about how you worked through that to like put this on the page?
That is a really good question. Thank you for asking that question.
And that's from Lauren Christensen. That's not that's Lauren. Yeah.
Okay. No, that's a, you know, that's right to my heart right there, because it's been a journey. You know what I mean? You know, going through just trying to get yourself out there, you know, getting a piece of work together is just, you know, labor intensive, because you have to be vulnerable. You know, you have to expose yourself in order to really connect. And so you're doing that on the page. You're exposing yourself, and you're, you know, like I think of writing as for catharsis, you know, as far as like trying to heal and transform yourself for the, you know, purpose of, you know, helping, you know, transform, you know, getting healthy yourself, but all at the same time, like in the hopes of like, this would give a reader the opportunity to transform if I'm able to transform while I write this. And so one of the things that would, you know, happen is that I would just I would stay creative. And that's, you know, I would suggest that for every writer out there. If you hit a snag at any point, is just stay creative in something. And so like I started painting, I started playing guitar. I started to, like, I do like bonsais. I like making bonsai trees. And so just staying creative and staying in that mental space. And I don't know why, I just felt like I knew I would be able to work my way back into writing at some point. I think there was just like an innate feeling like, well, as long as I stay creative, it's going to come to me. And so even over those like years, like, you know, there were time periods where it was like 2 years of doing that, you know, of just being away from the writing. So that would be my biggest suggestion, is just to stay creative. And, you know, like for writers, those small successes, you know, you get a story here, you're like, oh, well, I got a story in this journal, and I got this piece in this article in this journal, you know, like those little successes along the way, you know, those help out a great deal. So if you have pieces you can kind of get out there, you know, I think that helps too.
And then even, I mean, like writing and publishing one book kind of gives you some belief that you can do it again, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I feel like that's also important, right? Like,
yeah. And I think that, you know, whenever in 2018 when I got my agent, like that was whenever she said, you know, Oscar, we're going to have to add 30,000 words, you know, like any other time I would have been like, that's just not going to happen. Yeah. But because I had just landed an agent, you know, and I was like on high, because it take, you know, all that time, 2008, 2018, that's 10 years of like putting in the work, you know. And so I was like, I can do it. And I did, like within a pretty relatively short amount of time, I had, you know, added these chapters and rounded out the novel. And we continued to edit, you know, for the next year or so. But I got the content in there. But yeah, I think that those kind of successes, you'll definitely carry you like, okay, I got this. I kind of know what's expected now. And I feel like, you know, and I've definitely already put that into the next project. So.
No, it's nice to see that just like keeping nice to hear that, just like keeping your feet in that creative water, no matter what it is. Like you can maybe call on it when you really need it. I think that's beautiful. And then I do want to say, Rani Bopla, sorry for if I mispronounced your name, but she asked the first question because we're getting some anonymous, some with names. I feel like shout out the people that are asking, right? But the next question is from Susan Littman. What is it in the writings of women, so Stout, Olive Kittredge, and Monroe, that resonates with you?
I think that, like I'm the only boy, and I have two sisters. I grew up in a household with two grandmothers, and my mom is a single mom. So I've been, around matriarchs my entire life. Like that's been my world. So I just think that they feel I guess I'm more comfortable. Maybe that's what it is. I have a comfortability with it. So I think that that's probably the biggest part of it. And then my community, Cherokee community is very, very much, I would describe it as matriarchal. I mean, historically, traditionally, it's matriarchal, despite having the the patriarchal elements that have come in through colonization. That there's still definitely a strong matriarchal element there, and so we have very strong women in our community, and so I feel like I have healthy respect for matriarchs.
Yeah, and kind of the matriarchal voices in the book too feel like very real and honest and in touch with something experienced, right? Like it feels kind of natural and honest in that way. So that's pretty interesting. And then from Kelly Ray, which chapter are you most excited for people to read? Without like spoiling anything. So maybe this is also a good way to ask, and Kelly, I think this is still in tune with your question, but which character is your favorite? Which voice is your favorite?
Oh, that's a hard one. Oh man, no, that's a good question, but
Yeah.
I don't know if I can pick. It's one of those deals. I do love, I love Sissy, like Yolanda Chavez, Ever's sister. Sissy's her chapter, her voice I like her voice because her personality is kind of playful, in that kind of Kiowa way, but it kind of bites too, like she can sting you a little bit in the most pleasant way possible. She can sting you. So I really like that about Sissy's voice. I'm really fond of that particular chapter. And where Sissy and Lonnie Nowater have their interactions. I think that's super pivotal in the novel. But there's I love certain things about almost every voice. I mean, Oppie, her voice is to me is just really distinct, very comforting. I guess is how I would describe Oppie's voice. But Quentin, he's super playful. He's kind of, he likes to crack jokes. He's all about being funny and making people laugh. That's what that's kind of his personality. So I like that about him as well. So, but yeah, it's kind of hard to pick one. Yeah.
No, I don't think I could either. I don't know. I think that's a testament to the book, right? And I guess one final question, unless anyone has someone, and I have one more question after this if we got time for it. But
okay,
was there anything that and I'm curious to this too, because you did add so much, like from when you said giving it to your agent with like tens of thousands of words and then adding so much. But I'm wondering, like, was there anything, and we have an anonymous question, but was there anything you wanted to include that didn't end up in the final piece? Like what ended up on the chopping room floor?
There wasn't any like full chapter that was like,
Yeah.
we're not going to use it. So everything that I had brought to the agent stayed in, and then everything that me and Allie, that's my agent's name, Allie Levick, and so what me and Allie worked on as far as getting into the novel, that also stayed in. There were definitely certain aspects within the novel that were sliced and diced a little bit, like Lila Quitone, her chapter, it was longer. I would say it was almost twice as long. And so that was probably the biggest cut. So we had like, a good chunk of it kind of come off there. But everything else was more like bits and pieces, just more like just kind of slicing and dicing out, smaller things that to tighten it all up.
All right, well, cool. I mean, it's always, it takes forever, doesn't it? I don't know.
Yeah. It's good though, man. I really like that. I would prefer, I like writing a book with the team. You know what I mean? Like because so much of it is in isolation that at some point I feel like I need somebody to tell me, somebody to tell me like, is this the right path? If I need to switch it up a little bit, what needs to come out, what doesn't. And that's one of the, one thing I love about my agent is that she's always willing to kind of engage with what I write and, validate what's good and, straightforward about what's not. So that's what I need.
Yeah, because you don't need a lot of people on your team, but you need people that really get you, right? Like people that you trust.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it.
And like there's the whole kind of team at Algonquin too. I know we've both worked with.
Yeah.
You're working with him now, and I work in Kathy Poiri's.
Oh my goodness, Kathy. I learned so much from Kathy. Yeah. So this book just wouldn't be what it is right now if it wasn't for Kathy.
Yeah. No, the feeling's mutual. I think anyone that's ever worked with her feels the same way. Right. But I guess so now I'm curious to hear what you're working on now. You said you're working on something. So how's that coming along? Does it feel, does the process feel like faster since you've done it before? Or like, how's that coming along?
It's different. It's a different feeling for sure. I already had the, like I didn't have to add the 30,000 on this one. I already had a full, what needed to be there. But I mean, it's still kind of it's in a polishing phase, I would call it. So, I mean, we'll see how it all kind of pans out. Because I have, I haven't given it to the editor yet. So, so hopefully Kathy's not listening. No, I've said that already in other spots. So, but yeah, I haven't given it, handed over to the editor yet. But so we'll see how it all kind of pans out. So I have the, like the second book, I call it, I'm in like a polishing phase, but also have a third draft of a different novel, or a first draft of a third book written. And that was it's really rough, I kind of, so that needs a lot of work still. So that's kind of what I'm working on. I don't want to say exactly what they're about yet. Just because, I haven't gotten the green light on anything yet. So we'll see how, that part of it works. But, like my writing in general will follow certain kinds of themes. I feel like, like this, like I'm really interested in that decolonization work. I'm interested in like youth focus type work. I mean, that's been my life for 20 years. So I think you're always going to probably see some kind of element like youth empowerment type dynamics that happen there. Working frontline work, like directly in the community. You'll probably see a lot of that. Like a family-oriented type dynamic, you'll probably always see that in my fiction.
Yeah, and I guess is the plan to keep working in the job you have now? Because I guess it seems like you love the work and like you're doing important work too, and it seems really central to your identity as an artist, right? So yeah.
No, that's a good question. Yeah, I think that I'm always going to do something in the community. Like I'm always going to be working in the community in some kind of capacity. Like you said, I think it's just kind of an ingrained part of who I am. I've every once in a while I'll think about like maybe I should teach writing. Like I'll think about that sometimes, but I always get pulled back to trying to do something to try to help the community to overcome, some of those obstacles that are still persisting. So, yeah, I think.
And it takes kind of a lot of hands to do that work, right? It really does. So I think the that's all I got. And well, honestly, just thanks so much for chatting with me for a little bit, and thanks Nell and the Harvard Bookstore for hosting us. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thank you, Gabe. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out with us for a little bit and giving me a chance to talk about the book. Thank you, Nell.
Absolutely. Thank you both so much. This was a wonderful conversation. And thanks to those of you, as just to echo the sentiment from Gabriel and Oscar, thank you to all of you for joining us. And again, follow the link that I posted in the chat for harvard.com to purchase copies of Calling for a Blanket Dance. Support independent books, supported by getting this book specifically. Thank you so much. And that fantastic cover. And thanks to all of you. Stay well, everyone. Happy reading, and stay safe. Have a good night. Thank you. Thanks again.
Hopefully see y'all soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.